It's better to take a pause and think. It's like, if the conflict that you're having with your ADHD spouse is that they're not doing XYZ, you're going to have to do the work as well for yourself.
ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is usually first diagnosed in childhood and often lasts into adulthood. In fact, they say children with ADHD may have trouble paying attention or be overly active. It can be debilitating, but could it be a superpower? Well, I've invited a brave soul, one of my beloved Leadership Elite Mastermind mentees, PJ Accetturo, to share his trials and triumphs of the ADHD journey. Can't wait for you to join us. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is a call to leadership. PJ Accetturo.
Yeah, we don't have an ass in our name, so.
I'm going to start over.
Sorry.
No, this is okay. That's funny. My son, Abram, his last name is Sala, of course, and I was purposefully trying to make sure his middle name didn't start with an S because his initials would have been. Yes. I just try to help him out.
Kids are too.
You know? I'm like, dude, I totally hooked you up. I could have
made an ass out of you.
Yeah. Gosh. Accetturo. All right. PJ Accetturo. Welcome back.
Thank you.
It's good to have you.
Thanks, man.
You escaped a hurricane.
I did. We just got off the flight and a little jet lag because we've been preparing for the hurricane. But now we're here in sunny St. Louis.
Yeah, and welcome. And it's actually awesome timing because we wanted to have an episode on a very important topic, ADHD as a superpower. And this is something that I've been wanting to do for so many years now because coming from academia, I've witnessed a disparage in how we approach ADHD from a student and an educator perspective, but also how we see it thrive in practitioner circles, specifically in entrepreneurship. And I'd like to have a conversation around it from your experience because you have ADHD. And then I think we're going to integrate a little bit of other information to come in the episode. You got to listen in because we're going to have some more details coming in soon. Yeah. So tell me, what is ADHD?
ADHD, is kind of most classically defined as a neurodivergent sort of disorder, if you will, a condition, mostly relating to difficulty in keeping attention, having hyperactivity, and then even some aspect of impulsiveness.
And so that translates, let's call it in the classroom or in the workplace, in some social settings, to be perhaps unacceptable in terms of how people expect a person to behave, if you will.
Exactly, because essentially it often gets diagnosed / misdiagnosed in children who essentially are neurodivergent sort of thinkers, and our school system's designed around compliance, and for many tactile learners, sensory learners who like to feel everything, you feel at odds. I had went to learning disability programs in school, despite the fact that ended up coming out pretty strong in the end, like near 4.0. But it took me years to figure out. I thought I was really dumb because I just couldn't focus and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, my heart goes out to, all the other misfits. And this is so relevant, to entrepreneurs, because I can't tell you how often other entrepreneurs I meet also are ADHD, borderline, that kind of profile. So I think there's hope for kids. And a lot of times there's hope outside of medicine too, especially being so young. And so that's one of the things, I don't know, I just wanted to talk about today. Yeah.
Well, and you bring up something that's really important with entrepreneurs. And I've spoken with so many entrepreneurs, even those in our leadership group, our mastermind, who went through school and they felt, let's just say the word, they felt dumb. I've heard that word saying, felt that they didn't belong. They were not, they didn't have the skills necessary. And I think that's I think just illuminating how we approach this. And even from a disorder perspective, I think that even that terminology, we can even retool the terminology. Yeah. Because and we'll get to it when we talk about the superpower piece, right? But I think there are huge benefits from the perspective of someone who's, most of the entrepreneurs who I interact with have ADHD.
Right.
And I've found their ability to be creative, to think quickly, to speak very articulately, to multitask is just, it's amazing. You think, well, why can't this be done in an educational environment? And I don't think it's the necessarily the students that are broken. I think it's the system.
Right. And it really, because there's maybe only one way to get things done in the school system, whereas in entrepreneurship, there's 100 ways to get anything done, and you choose, how you want to approach problems. Whereas in school, it's narrow.
Right. Yeah. And so as we start to get into this conversation, I don't think it's enough just for you and I to talk. So that's why we've invited your wife.
Where?
Hello.
Charlene's here.
What?
Surprise.
When did you get here?
It popped out of your suitcase.
Wondered why it's so heavy.
Ouch.
Oh, no.
Oh, this is going to be fun. I think it's so important for you to be here, Charlene, because the vantage point you'll offer us from the spouse's perspective is going to be invaluable in how we really talk through this whole idea of ADHD and how it affects your home life, how you navigate, how PJ reacts, and how you can maximize the possibilities and the potential within this opportunity to have a superpower. So let's get right into it. We've talked a little bit about the frequency in entrepreneurship, right? So entrepreneurs, I need to research some studies,
right.
And it's still up and coming. There's still a lot of research that still needs to be done. But from my direct observations, some empirical observations, as I stated, it's a common phenomena in this space. And I'm glad you brought up the mindset that, well, because you're not in a set system, and because that system it binds you. And I think, tell me about ADHD and how the brain works, or how the frustrations work when you are limited to a very specific set of parameters to operate within.
Right. Typically there's new studies saying that ADHD is actually, there's some executive dysfunction that, kind of takes place in the brain, but actually it's usually a product of a low dopamine baseline, more so than most people have. So we can talk about it later, but a lot of people that have ADHD in school, when they're kids, they'll drink coffee way early, drink caffeine way earlier than kids. They'll when they're young kids, they'll have a lot more sugar than other kids. When they're a bit older, they'll take recreational drugs a lot more closely. And then you can get medicated. But the idea is basically that there's so many sensory inputs that it's difficult to sort of keep on track for one thing. And so oftentimes I think you'll have ADHD people that are huge generalists, to where they're able to get distracted and do a lot of things at once. But it has the disadvantage of not always having such a strong focus on timeliness, right? And also on completing tasks, which
brings us to Charlene.
That's right.
Honestly, like, in a lot of times in business, it's great because you have teams to help strengthen your weaknesses. And I have a lot of great processes now. But at home, honestly, is the biggest casualty of sometimes being ADHD. Maybe you can share a little more, Charlene?
Yeah, I think it's both and, right? Like, I think depending on the partner that you have, you can have a really good dynamic and a support, but also just like the toll that it takes in like more of an intimate relationship can be a little bit more difficult. So, I think in the book that I read, The ADHD Effect on Marriage, the author writes about how when you're courting someone with ADHD, it's like the best relationship ever because they have this hyper focus on you. And so they're planning the most adventurous dates, the most epic, like, things to do together. And then a lot of spouses, non-ADHD spouses, once they get married, within a year or two, that hyper focus has moved on to something else. And it's all of a sudden they're feeling forgotten or just like dropped off of the face of the earth. It's a really big wake up call. And for some people, it's like, do you just not like me anymore? And it's really sad.
So did PJ give you a disclaimer when you started dating that
No.
I have ADHD? We're going to have this amazing adventure.
Do you know how to date, Nate? That's not what you do. It's like leading with like, hey, I have herpes.
Oh my God.
But we can still make this work, I promise.
I don't know.
The juice is worth the squeeze.
We could edit that out. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I don't even think PJ was fully aware of his own like ADHD. So,
what were you thinking? Were you thinking, wow, this guy is just so on fire?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like when PJ and I were first dating, like there were so many things that I loved about his character that actually were ADHD symptoms that I didn't know were manifesting or playing out. So it's like spontaneity and adventure and fun. A lot of people who have ADHD are very quick to be forgiving, to move from feelings of pain to quickly moving on to feelings of joy. And so it's like, wow, that's really awesome. I didn't even know that was like possibly a symptom of the ADHD. So.
And that's related to the low dopamine thing where, you don't like to sit in maybe sorrow or sadness or pain because maybe your dopamine's already low enough. And so it's like, okay, let's spice this up. Like, let's move on. That's not fun anymore.
Let's be happy. Yeah, exactly. They're like the golden retrievers of human beings. So it's pretty great.
Just throw the ball. I'll go.
Yeah. So, that's awesome. And those are things that I definitely like gravitated towards in PJ's character and personality. And so, but like as things, continue to unfold, it looks a little different behind the closed doors, and that's okay. But I think it's like a learning process for the both of us.
Well, I feel like it's worth it to deep dive into maybe issues we had in our marriage. I'm fine. Like I'm fine with sharing stuff on the podcast.
Do you consent? Yeah.
Yes.
I do. Yeah, I do consent. Cause I'm sure there's other ADHD entrepreneurs listening, and my guess is many of them might be male, and then they're they might have marriage conflicts where oftentimes in a similar case study to us, dating's exciting and fun, especially when you're young and maybe your business isn't as growing. There's not as many sort of ways in which you can deploy all of those ADHD qualities. And so, for like years, we just had crazy dates and it was really exciting. And then as I got more sucked into my mid to late 20s and trying to build a career, that's what ended up taking so much more priority and urgency in the sense of my mind of like, man, I got to get this crap figured out. We're trying to build a life, we're trying to buy a home, we're trying to XYZ. And the priority goes lower because in some senses too, just honestly, like whether it's conscious or subconscious, I think ADHD people can say, I like new things. I want to learn them. I want to learn, this is maybe strong language. I want to learn how to conquer something. And then once that is, I got like a trophy for it, there's nothing new to extract from it. And so it's less exciting than other new endeavors. And sadly, marriages can fall to the wayside that way too. And I think that definitely happened to us at times. So I'm sorry again.
I mean, like even hearing that language is a little bit on the sad side, right? Because you use the language conquer and trophy.
Right.
And so that could just like sound very objectifying.
No, totally.
Times.
And I tried to like say it's really harsh language.
Yes. And so I think, so I know that, and I have a pretty good self-awareness for the most part. And so I'm able to put language to those feelings that I was having. And I think I was able to communicate like in those moments where I felt like I wasn't being pursued. But I do think there is this thing, it's like that'll happen where a certain point of contention in a person's relationship, they'll just circle that thing over and over and over again. And part of it is because in the book, the author, I believe her name's Melissa Orlov, she mentions how what happens is there's an ADHD symptom, and then there's a response from the spouse, and then there's the response from the person who has ADHD. And so it starts with the symptom. And if my habit is to react to PJ's symptom with anger or frustration or bitterness or things like that, he then reacts to my response, and it just becomes this really difficult cycle to pull yourself out of. And that can be really hard. You know, I think with PJ being an entrepreneur, it's great because he's married to an entrepreneur as well. So we both have like our own businesses and our things that we've grown on our own that we're very passionate and excited about and stuff like that. But we do them remarkably different, you know, and that's different. It's just different, you know? And I think in my own really difficult times, like I think my way is the right way. It's the better way. I'm a Virgo. I mean, like, what do you expect from me? So, you know, I mean, I have to almost like put up like a wall or a boundary, honestly, with how much I know about how PJ does things, because my brain will react in a way where it's like, that's not the way to do it, or you shouldn't do it that way. And it's like, in order for me to have respect for his process, I have to have some boundaries with all of it. And it can get really messy. You know, I think it's still messy now. You know, I feel like we're still developing language for the things that are happening in our marriage, and still reading books since, you know, like PJ chooses not to treat his ADHD with medicine. I don't know if that's really the right choice for everybody. You know, I feel like that's between yourself and your partner as well. And so for us, we agreed to let PJ kind of figure out like what's going to work best for him, because he didn't want to get medication. He didn't want to lose the superpower that he feels like he gets from the ADHD. And I don't want him to lose part of himself either. I wouldn't want him to ask me to do something like that either. And so I think it's been a journey where both of us are working on ourselves to make sure that we're both in mental healthy spaces as well, just because a lot of anger and resentment can build up on either side because of the misunderstandings that really often take place, you know?
And maybe I can just speak into one coping strategy we've both, like awareness is probably the key, is just reading about, you know, symptom and response to response. You know, for instance, I'll do something like I'll forget to take you on a date for 2-3 weeks. And then it boils and boils and blows up where it's like, you don't care about our marriage anymore, something like that. And then now I'm, you know, kind of have that like maybe beat dog kind of mindset of like, what can I do for you today? Blah, 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 blah. But like, you know, we can mitigate a lot of that obviously by understanding the cycles. But then too, I think what's helped us a lot in recent months and years is habit formation, like make all our, you know, like now I've been making the bed every single day, and that's small.
It's small, but it means a lot to me. It means
a lot to you.
Yes.
And that's been good. We've recently been doing weekly dates to some degree.
Yeah.
And that also has been helpful. And so I think for ADHD people, habit forming on things that maybe wouldn't come as spontaneously as they maybe used to is so helpful for maybe your partner who likes structure and stability. And, you know, anything can become a habit. Yeah.
Well said. I love the points that you're making. One that resonated with me was you mentioned the phrase, what do you expect from me? Right? that's a great question to ask. Like, that's a great phrase.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily from the, what do you expect from me? But I know you said it in but what is it that you expect from me in this partnership?
Yeah.
And what can I deliver on that expectation currently in this context, in this scenario, based on these parameters and what we have available as far as resources? And I think that's a great starting point, because what you're talking about is communication. I love the way you put, we're forming language, right? We haven't arrived. I think it's so, so important to give grace to yourselves. So we're still forming this language. And so how many years have you been married now?
I'll be 8 in December.
8, yeah. Okay. That's crazy.
So in the first 10 years, right, you think, okay, we're laying a foundation. My wife and I have been in it for over 2 decades. We're still forming language.
Wow.
And that's okay. We'll be forming language until the day we're gone.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But that sets a realistic expectation.
Right.
And I think that's a great foundation for building your relationship that doesn't put unrealistic expectations on one another based on your own ideology of what the relationship, air quotes, should look like.
Right. Because for so many ADHD people, you kind of just follow your curiosity and feelings as a lifestyle, and it can have huge dividends of success and work and business, and yet can be really hard at home because there's structure, a lot more structure at home for consistency. And that's where a lot of our conflict has lied in the past.
So then the natural step is, okay, here's where we are, right? So my expectations for today may be unrealistic, but let's look at those expectations for 12 months from now.
Yeah.
For 18 months. This is where you're talking about the boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? So you create boundaries that guide what's acceptable and unacceptable based on what we have available in terms of who we are and what resources we have. Because once you get into the relationship, I mean, it's a whole package, right? You know, you made a commitment for all of me.
Yeah.
And it's like that for all of us. But that doesn't mean that we use it as an excuse to not progress.
Yeah.
Because progress is essential for the relationship to not burn out.
Right.
Any relationship, whether your relationship with your employer, relationship with your spouse, relationship with your community.
Right.
I mean, of course, if you have children, or even with your pet.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Because it's headed toward a better future state. Right.
That's right. Yeah. So that's where the communication comes in, and the shared vision for that future. Right. Where do we share a vision of where we like to be together through these types of, and I really want to use the words wisely, because, you know, you may call them challenges. In some way, they can be challenging situations, right?
Oh, yeah.
But not from the perspective of limited to surrendering to the challenge, right? It's rising to the challenge.
That's good.
Yeah. Rising to what are the possibilities through this? For example, even you being here today, right? You came because there was a hurricane.
Sure did.
Right?
Yep.
But that challenge gave us an opportunity to have a much deeper conversation.
Yeah.
Totally.
Around this subject. So then the question is, okay, how can we use the opportunities with ADHD to fuel a better future for our relationship?
And truly, like, it's been led to so much growth because of this struggle. Like, awareness for myself and who I am deeper, awareness into who you are deeper, and then, vice versa. Yeah. We've been seeing a therapist for the last 2+ years individually and then personally. And the opportunity to be aware of who you are, how you work, and what your expectations are has been really painful. And it's also been so satisfying in a sense of connectedness to the self and connectedness to the other. And that's the opportunity of challenge, right? Rising to it.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because so many people, and some of our listeners would have heard me talk about this before, so many people look at seeing a professional, a therapist, a counselor as, oh no, right? You've got, it's almost like, oh, I feel so sympathetic for you. But you go see a personal trainer and they're cheering you on like, oh, that's so cool.
Right.
Right? So if you want to improve your physical well-being,
Yeah.
society deems it as a +1.
For sure.
You want to improve your mental, your emotional, your spiritual well-being, right? Then it's, oh,
I'm sorry you're
poor
going through
thing,
that.
I'm so
looking
sorry.
forward to
Like,
you on the other side of that. But like,
what?
bro, like truly though, everything stems from, like, everything in our lives stem from the center. And the center is how we view the world and ourselves and each other. And that only comes, like, the growth in that comes from awareness. And you don't know what you don't know. And so it is through coaches, it's through therapists, it is through spouses, and partners that we can learn so much deeper about ourselves, each other, the world. And man, it's paid dividends for, like, my business to do all of these hard works in our interpersonal lives. Yeah. And yeah.
No, I was this is going to sound like I'm tooting my own horn because
you should.
So
Come on.
there's that. But I would say that for me, I think a big shift in our relationship changed when I stopped looking at PJ to be like the source of my happiness. Yes. And because we were just getting to a point in our marriage where I was having the same conflict with him over and over again. And I wasn't getting any happier. He wasn't getting any happier. So I think I was just like, okay, fine. I'm going to do the things that feel good for me to do, like mentally, emotionally, physically, all those things. And so I would say it's funny, but PJ has followed my lead.
Yeah.
With almost every area.
No, her getting
in my
business.
Mastermind. I joined a mastermind group, and then PJ joined a mastermind group because he saw the benefits. And then I started working with a therapist. PJ started working with the therapist because he saw the benefits. I started working with a trainer. PJ started working with a trainer because there are benefits. And so I would say that, like, it's better to take a pause and think. It's like if the conflict that you're having with your ADHD spouse is that they're not doing XYZ, it's like, this sounds way more simple than what it is, and it's not, and I don't mean for it to sound simple, but there is a part where it's like you're going to have to do the work as well for yourself and not just expect the other person to do that work too.
Right. As an ADHD person, it's not my partner's job to adjust for ways in which maybe I'm not being fair. It's a mutual, and if anything, the pressure is a little more on the person who has the ADHD on how to cope in a reasonable way that lines up with the expectations. Usually.
Yes. Yeah. If what you're saying is that your ADHD is your responsibility, then 100%.
Yeah,
Yes, that's true. Like, I can't, because what happens when the spouse takes on the responsibility is that it becomes more of a parent-child dynamic.
Right.
And I would probably argue that most of your listeners who might be in a relationship with someone who has ADHD or is the ADHD spouse, like, the spouse who has ADHD either feels like they're being treated like a child from their partner. And that's really, do we cuss on this, Paz? No? No. That's really sucky. I don't know how it works. I'm sorry. It is, though, I don't think any adult wants to be treated like a child, but I've found myself doing that to PJ. And when I read the book that I read, there are certain excerpts that are in there from partners who have ADHD that talk about how they feel emasculated, they feel like a child, they feel unloved, and they feel shame because they don't know how to fix it. And I felt so heartbroken over that because it's like, oh, PJ's never used that language with me, but I just wonder how often I've caused him to feel something because I'm like trying to like control his diagnosis, you know?
So let's look at it from the perspective of examples of like in the home.
Yeah, yeah.
So like what, you know, because I'm interested to know where the lines are drawn or if they're even blurred on. So for example, you know, is it taking out the trash and you're like, well, I guess the trash isn't going to get taken out at all, or do I have to do it myself? You know, what are some of the real world effects in the home that you've got to navigate through?
I mean, we can list out common things. So I think cleanliness is probably my guess is across the board. A lot of ADHD people.
How about you, PJ?
Well, yeah, for me, it's not like a total pigsty sort of thing, but my priority oftentimes is always just so much about what I'm curious about that everything always takes a second seat for those periods where I'm quote unquote in the zone.
Now there's cleanliness and then there's messiness, right? My wife will say, you like things nice and neat, but I like them clean, right? So, I mean, there's a difference.
Yeah.
Where do you
I feel like in the middle / on the messy side, in the sense of like, it's not like total laboratory genius where like everything's like a rambling mess. It's just, there can be scattered bottles, they can be whatever, there can be dishes undone, because like I like think about 3 things every day, and I'm not going to listen. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think about work, I think about play, and I think about family and friends. And dishes, don't care. Like, you know, taking out the trash, don't care. Like personal, sometimes like hygiene of like doing my hair and all those kind of things. Like if it's not work or if it's not play or if it's not family and friends, like it's just so below 0 of my priority list. And so it gets neglected. Yeah.
The amount of Spindrift cans that are empty, but still in my line of vision.
Yeah.
Unreal. Socks are just always that they live under the bed. That is where they live.
Just get there somehow.
There are lots of little things. For the most part, he's good about it. And I just like ask, hey, can you handle that? Can you pick that up? And what I've had to learn how to do is if he says he's going to get to it, I have to learn to just be like, to trust that he's going to get to it. And that part's really hard and annoying because I have like a timeline and it's like, hey, if I asked, it means I want it now.
Yeah.
Not later. And that drives him nuts because he's like, yep, give me a second. But like to him, a second means in the next 20
like
minutes to an hour.
I think ADHD people think of things in focus blocks. Like if I'm doing something, I'm doing it for 30 to 90 minutes and that's all I'm doing. And then afterwards, to the multitaskness, like you then think about, okay, it's house chores and you can do 100 things at once and it's fine. It's for that block. But the problem oftentimes is like, okay, I'll do that later. And then you forget because something else gets your attention, you know.
Hearthstone.
Sure. Whether it's work, whether it's play, or whether it's social, you know,
Yeah, we don't actually clean together. If I'm cleaning but we're like having like a cleaning day, I'll send him somewhere else to focus in that area because we do things so differently. And I'm like, this doesn't need to be a fight. So you clean this room here and I'll probably finish literally everything else in the time that it takes you to do this one room. Yeah. But whatever, we weren't in each other's way. We weren't stepping on each other's toes. So thumbs up.
But that's a great example because what it does is it says, okay, here's what's possible, right? And even though my responsibility, if you were to weigh out like my contribution to this specific area is greater than yours, once you start assessing a relationship, a marriage in that way, it's a slippery slope, right? Because then it's like, oh, now we're keeping score.
Yeah.
And it's not accounting.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like it's credits and debits. It's a relationship. There's things that you can do better. There's things that you can do better. Right? And so this is where I wanted to get to because I think people want to know, like, where am I enabling? And where am I simply filling the gap in an area that I know is just not going to happen, not because of maliceness or carelessness. It's simply an area that I've got to own this part of the area because I'm just better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good question, because sometimes if maybe expectations aren't clearly stated, it will lead to bitterness over years. And if you can sometimes instead just figure out a solution together, at least you're aware. So like we've been having a cleaner come. She was coming every once a week. Now it's a little less, but I mean, that's been a huge boon. We've been doing meals that are either bought at the store that are pre-made, or some days we'll just do Uber a lot. Yeah, just but I think that oftentimes the onus is on, you as the ADHD person. Okay, I don't want to cook tonight, and I may not end up cooking at all this week. So I have to proactively say, who can I delegate this to? How do I pay for it? Because it's still my responsibility that it gets done, but it's not my responsibility that I have to do it.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Right? It's your responsibility that it gets done. So be creative.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think even non-ADHD, world, if you will, this is an application that I think has a lot of merit. And I use an example. I love a clean car. Okay. And my wife, she loves it too, but not nearly as passionately as me. All right. So I'll get in her car. I'm like, I can't even ride in your car because you got, bottles of stuff or receipts or all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, you need to clean your car. And then it dawned on me one day is, what if she started saying that kind of stuff about my laundry? Because she does my laundry. She's like, you know what? Your laundry's dirty.
You do it.
You do it. But I don't.
Yeah.
Because she's taking that responsibility. So why don't I clean her car?
Yeah.
Right. That's good.
Duh.
Yeah.
So I started cleaning her car, and not saying in a way, well, I cleaned your car today. Like, look, it's just going to be clean because I like a clean car and it's important to me and I do it better. So I'm just going to take it on. And you're going to have a clean car, just like I have clean clothes. But we put, we have these double standards sometimes. We don't even realize it. I mean, it took me 20 years to figure that one out.
Right.
Yeah.
But once I figured it out, it was like, it was actually, it was a burden released from me.
Yeah.
That's good.
I was liberated.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's like one partner necessarily should do all of the grunt work or whatever, but I think there is that sort of easy genius zone of like particular things don't feel as much like work to you as they do the other partner. And so you should try and, sort of divvy up everything to what feels at least not totally net negative.
Yeah, because, and that's part of the partnership. I mean, it's a partnership. And just like in business, partnerships will live or die based on the vision. Are we going in the same direction?
Right.
Because if we don't share a purpose, we're going in the same direction, we're going to end up in different places anyway. The expectation.
Yeah.
And the communication.
Yeah.
I mean, those are three key factors that I've seen in business. I just had a conversation today with a client who partners are splitting up, and literally you can just trace it back to those three things, and it works the same in a marital relationship, right?
Yeah.
And I think that when we can get to that place where we have clarity in our vision together, we share a purpose, just like we did on day one when we were wooing one another, right?
Right.
But here's the thing: once you start talking about that, it creates an awareness, back to the awareness, and then you can reprioritize it.
Right.
You have to have the talk.
Right.
Yes.
You have to have the what happened talk.
Right. Right. Because even if nothing changes, quote unquote, or like she still ends up doing the laundry most of the time, at least if she has an understanding that like, I know she puts in so much more work in that area, and I'm sorry I can't do it, or I'm sorry I don't want to do it, but I am appreciative. Like sometimes that just bodes well to where, like the car thing. Yeah.
Well, and it's leadership. Like you talked about, PJ taking your leadership. When, I had a basket full of clean clothes just the other day, and sometimes I'll put my own clothes in the wash, but it's just been so crazy. I've been doing so much, and not a word out of my wife, not a word that, hey, did you see the clothes? Did you see I folded them? Nothing. It was just a nice basket. And that's also leadership. But it's also based on trust and mutual respect and adoration, because she knows that I am not going to, at least intentionally, take advantage of that care.
Right.
And that's another place you have to be in your relationship, to where you know that it's not intentional. I just have to point it out when it's going off the rails, so we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
Do you have those conversations?
Yeah. I would say.
And how do they go?
Well, I would say I'm probably the one who brings things up more often, just because I feel like I'm usually the one who's more aware of when my needs aren't being met. Because what I think happens is usually it's the emotional things that aren't really like getting met or taken care of or addressed. And then I feel either a little neglected and just frustrated in that process. And so I'm the one who brings up the conversation. We have a talk about it and try to like redirect things. Sometimes we'll jump in a session with our therapist and do like a joint session just because we see her individually, and then we'll just jump in and do it together. And that really helps just because she's able to understand the both of us and where we're coming from, like what our past traumas, like what they're bringing to the table, just because it's so complicated, right? It's like you're two individual beings who've grown up in, for us, different cultures, different lifestyle, all the things that comes with being human, right? And so it's like it takes a village to be a family. Like, and I mean, like, speaking of, I do feel like we need to address the fact that we don't have children. And I will say, because of that, it's not that we have it easier, but the responsibilities that we have to like figure out are not affecting small children. And so I will say that like, that's a very different, probably even more emotionally charged conversation when you add children into the mix of things, because a lot of people will end up feeling like they're raising multiple children, including their spouse as well. And that could be very isolating. And so I do feel like I want to acknowledge people on that side of the table and be like, I see you. This is hard, and I'm sorry, but I will say typically I'm the one who addresses the hard stuff.
You keyed in on something right there.
Oh, what?
is empathy.
Yeah, I have a lot of that.
And it's so genuine, even as you're speaking with one person in our audience that hears you and is like, wow, I'm in this space right now, and I'm so thankful to hear that. And this is really, all of this is a reflection of what we look at in terms of what we call servant leaders.
Right.
And if you haven't listened, here's a plug for a callback to our servant leadership series that we did that goes through each of these individual characteristics of servant leadership, and you're hitting on them individually. So, for example, one is listening. Like, if you can't possibly hope to serve as a leader and have empathy unless you first listen.
Yeah.
And not just listen to the other person, listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Listen to your own
heart,
your body, your emotions, to see where you talked about trauma. Where do I need healing? Which is actually the third aspect of this. So the second is empathy. Well, actually, no, it's fourth. Fourth is healing, and then awareness.
Right.
Healing, and a number of different aspects and characteristics. But we're talking about all of these as we unroll, what it's like to navigate this tender, but essential space, of ADHD. So you've got the challenges that arise. So your communication, adding others who are able to 100%. Speak into your lives. Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. Don't listen to the naysayers and the haters.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think any endeavor with challenges is like a battle, if you will. And the more tools in which we've seen other battles, we've seen outcomes of those battles, and we've seen the ways in which new techniques create better strategic advantages in those battles, the easier it can be to plan future battles to where, you know, we're not planning to fail, we're planning to win.
Stop right there.
Yeah, go.
Because someone listening right now isn't planning to fail, but they believe this trajectory is headed to failure. Have you been there?
Yeah.
And what did you do?
We failed. We died. Like, we know we had
You know what I mean. The ultimate
Yeah.
failure is saying this is just not going to work.
You're right. And I think in many ways we thought that and spoke that to one another, not in like full ultimatum, but you know what I mean? Like,
No, I think
we hit all the lows of nearing separation / divorce. And I think in the midst of that, we were able to build up something with a lot more integrity and foundation, because you know what, suffering comes from clarity, right? Like suffering comes from seeing things as they actually are, because we have a false view on reality at all times. And when we see things as they are, you know, like this isn't working, I want to leave. It gives us immense amounts of suffering, because we're like, oh gosh, I now see my marriage for what it is. It was a shell. I had a naive view on it. And so I think,
does it also give you hope?
well, it can, once you have clarity. So once you're able to see things as they are, you can see maybe a better vision for a future state that you intentionally want to build rather than reactionally want to build. But it does require mutual desire to change and create something proactively, right?
So Charlene, were you packing bags?
Ish. I mean, yeah. I think it's like I feel all the things all the time. I just want to be cautious with like phrasing, because I mean, there are some scenarios, because we don't know everybody's like marriage story, and there are some scenarios where like keeping the relationship for the sake of the relationship is actually like probably a more toxic thing to do. You know, it's like, I think what a lot of us don't realize is the ways that non-ADHD spouses can become verbally abusive to their partners by like being demeaning towards them and really belittling them. And I know I've had my moments where I've belittled PJ, or I've made him feel like he is a failure and that he can't accomplish the things that he wants to. And that comes just like from my own insecurities too, and but also my needs as an adult. Like, so the time that I think I was done, and I did kind of give an ultimatum, was like when PJ was really like trying to grab at all the entrepreneurial opportunities that he had available. At one point it was crypto. At one point it was trailer parks or mobile home parks. At another point it was like this other thing. And he was bouncing from idea to idea to idea. And for me, like I had to realize that like what was happening in me is I wasn't happy with who I was anymore. Like I didn't like being me anymore. Like, and I like being me. I'm a fun person. I'm a great time. I'm a really good friend. I'm a good listener and stuff like that. But it got to the point in our relationship where it's like, I don't even like who I am anymore, because I feel like all I'm doing is just being angry at you or feeling frustrated with you. And like, that sucks. I don't like feeling this in my body, you know? And so I think I just told PJ, I'm like, this is what I need you to be responsible for. I don't care how you make it. Drive for Uber. Figure it out. But I'm not going to figure that out for you. And this is like mandatory. There's no wiggle room. If this money isn't coming in, this specific amount, that's on you. And if this doesn't change, that's going to be a different conversation then. because like at that point, my safety, I felt like my safety was in jeopardy of like what made me feel safe as a person. And
you felt he had it in him because you made the commitment that this had to change. So you had to have believed it. Otherwise you wouldn't even have made the
you're
statement.
Right. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I think, I don't know if I knew he had it in him, but I think I loved him enough to let him try. And so it like and I've told PJ before, because it's like with where he's at in his business now, I mean, like he's doing amazing things and it's really incredible to watch happen. And for a while, I actually felt like I wasn't allowed to enjoy the celebration with him. Like I couldn't like participate in that because I felt like I was someone who was like negative in that. And it actually helped because my friend was just like, you have been his ride or die since the beginning. And like the things that PJ's been able to accomplish, he could not accomplish that without like your consistency. So like, no, were you like big cheerleader on every single project? Absolutely not. She's like, but it's not your job to do that. It's your job to be his wife. It's your job to support him. And that does not always look like, whatever you say, babe, that looks great. Do it. Blah. Like, no, you know? And again, like, you know, like everyone's marriage is different. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's sense of safety is different and what they need in their day-to-day lives, especially when you start introducing children into that process. If you have an ADHD spouse who isn't producing a good income and you have a family to raise, that's problematic, period, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more flexibility, I think, that PJ and I have because we lack children. But at the same time, it has not come without its challenges. And it has not come without those like come to Jesus moments or like, I'm going to accidentally strangle you.
Kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can speak to the flip side of that in that season. That was about two to 3 years ago. I mean, every entrepreneur knows the struggle of the discovery process in trying to find your thing, your genius zone, your niche. And sadly, it takes years. I mean, honestly, probably most people go through their 20s trying to figure out what that is. But most entrepreneurs don't just strike gold year one, year two, or year whatever their business. They chase up the wrong trees. And the issue is like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I necessarily could have given myself better advice because I had to have gone through all these failed businesses to find the one that I ended up with, because those failed businesses taught me essential skills throughout the process. Even if it's not failed, even if it's just like, well, it wasn't my thing. Like, you know, like I went through, and that's a great thing about being ADHD is you can essentially just find new industries, go super deep in a matter of 4 to 6 weeks of like this crazy intense hyper focus session and learn pretty decent, like pretty high level. Like, and I went from real estate to acquisitions to I've been a director, I've been a writer, I've been all these things. And I have a decent amount of like expertise in all of those various things. And so now as a CEO of an entertainment company, like all those things I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did learn acquisitions. I'm so glad I did learn entrepreneurship. I'm so glad I didn't learn all these sort of disparate things. And it totally makes sense now. And I would never be the leader I am today if any of those things succeeded. But it was hell for our marriage. And I don't know how we could have avoided that in some senses, because the problem with ADHD people is that their superpower usually aligns with their curiosity, finding a product, finding a market, finding a niche, finding the founder fit. And when all those things that are in alignment, and like they are right now, everything's on fire, you can be wildly profitable, you can be so abundant. And now we have like some of our best generalities of our marriage of like, relationships amazing, like personal fitness, therapy, all those things are like rock solid because it's a cycle of abundance. I don't actually have an answer for like what stopped that cycle of scarcity. Like everyone loves those things in the podcast when they're like, it's one thing. Go. What was the answer?
You started taking care of your mental health.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, I think that was a big turning point because the first session that PJ and I did together, I actually brought him in on it. My therapist had never met PJ yet. I was seeing her for a few months and I was just telling her what I was experiencing. And so we bring PJ in and like, honestly, what the deeper thing was, it wasn't even about like his jumping around work from this thing to this thing to this thing, as much as it was, he wasn't prioritizing his mental health. And he kept doing this thing where he would say, well, once this thing picks up, or whatever this dream thing is, picks up, then I'll start working with a therapist and blah, 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 blah. But I think the reality is like your mental health just affects every outlet of your life. You are a whole person. You cannot separate business and professional. You are one human being. And so I call BS on like this is business, it's not, like it's, you can't separate yourself as a person. You are one human being walking in this planet. And so your personal life affects your business affects your personal life and spiritual and emotional, and around it goes, you know what I mean? And so he wasn't prioritizing mental health. And so it's like he was bouncing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing because he was just trying to grab something that would help him. And
if I can speak into that, and I think every ADHD identifying member of the audience will really resonate with this. It is the struggle of maybe running from some of your problems. And that's what I was doing. I was running from everything. I was trying to chase all these things up the tree, which could be the answer to my solutions. But I think you're right. I think the time and space that it took to center myself and try and have clarity and reduce the noise was so beneficial for finding focus on the vision. And once I found the vision for our marriage, the vision for my mental state, the vision for our company and what we're doing, everything started to find peace and restfulness when the waters calmed down of your mind. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
You're welcome.
I'd send you a bill, but we're married, right?
Yeah.
This is beautiful. It's truly amazing to just listen and be a part of this conversation. It's actually, I can't speak for all podcast hosts, but if you can create a conversation that is so vibrant, even without your direct input, it's remarkable. The mental health aspect that you zero in on, it cannot be understated. Everything stems from our health. And of course, our physical health is important as well. Because if you can't get out of bed, you're not going to get much done, right? But the mental health aspect, that clarity and that focus and that vision and being able to calm the mind and really understand where is it that I need to be in this moment, not necessarily, because oftentimes we think, well, I need to be here in 6 to 8 months or 12 months, so I'm just going to go. No, let's just stop. Stop. Where do I need healing? Where do I need healing right now in this moment? And often I can't answer that question on my own. I need help. That's why we have all these wonderful people on this planet.
Yeah.
Who can help us? And
people who don't just blow smoke up your butt or haven't oftentimes gone to those dark places themselves.
Yeah.
And that's the you know, now I get to speak really nice things about you. Like, I love
you don't say nice
well,
anymore.
I think we were talking about the struggle, but I want to make it clear that, you know, this relationship has been, you know, the greatest thing that's ever happened to, you know, me in my life, and it's outside of Jesus or something. I don't know. But like, for Charlene leading that servant leadership of just leading herself into healing, and then inviting me into that journey as well, into her healing, and then into my healing as well, and supporting, you know, me on that inner work and that inner healing. I don't know. I'm just 10 times the man I am now than before I met her, and it's a result of just her and her incredible leadership. I love you.
Thanks.
You know, it reminds me of when. And you don't have to have ADHD to know that there's struggles along the way.
Yeah.
And when you bring a partner and a spouse into this entrepreneurial life, and you're an entrepreneur as well. Well, I remember those early days. So I went into business in 1995. I met my wife in 99. We were married in 01. So I had only been a business owner for 6 years. Still a long way to go. But I remember when I was about to get married, like, well, I mean, ramen noodles and Aldi bologna is not going to cut it, because you got someone else in the mix now, and your roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship is not going to work. You're going to have to start building on stability. But at the same time, you need to vision cast of what it means to walk this journey with someone who is an entrepreneur, because there are zero safety nets. I mean, you fall, you hit the pavement, unless you got a trust fund or some other vehicle. Most of us, we're scrapping, we're bootstrapping.
Yeah.
And I wonder, not necessarily that it makes the road less tenuous or stressful, because you still have to deal with the consequences of where are we going to get money? Yeah. Where are we going to be able to make our ends meet? Where is this road taking us? But I wonder if more of us could share, look, it's going to be a hard road. It's going to be a challenging road, but we're going to take this road together. And I am committed to my last breath to achieving what we hope and desire to achieve. That, I think, is a healthy approach to embarking on this journey. Because it's going to be, but here's the thing. You're in the movie business, you're in the film business, you're in the story business, right?
The deeper the struggle, the greater the joy.
I mean, and so maybe there's some pushback on this, but what story isn't a story worth partaking in that doesn't have a struggle, right? Because if life is just the Truman Show,
right?
The same weather every day. I guess if you live in San Diego, you're like, it is the same weather every day. But I tend to fall into the classification of when you strengthen your struggle muscles, your character is built, and the flip side is you can overwork your struggle muscles. And that goes back to the awareness piece of like knowing when, hey, is this not working because this is too taxing on our spirit, our emotion, our bodies. But it all goes full circle because you're able to communicate.
Yeah.
The heart of your relationship, ADHD, non-ADHD, is communication. Do we have open lines? Is there trust? Do we know that we're not trying to hurt each other? Trying to help each other.
Yeah.
Trying to listen. And maybe it's not helping each other as much as it's helping myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say one thing too that really will help is they say the Bible verse like love covers a multitude of sins or whatever. I think that if I can go above and beyond in certain areas, especially in skill strength areas like adventure, fun, spontaneity, dating, that will pay such dividends in smoothing out all little bumps that are my maybe weaknesses or whatever that I'll miss with our relationship. If Charlene feels like, man, he's like overabundantly pouring into our relationship with new date ideas or new gift ideas, like all little things don't become as big of things if her maybe core needs are met like that.
It's a good point, because I want to talk a little bit about that. It's a great segue about intentionality. Intentionality on the part of the person who has ADHD to invest in the well-being and the experience of their spouse. And I mean, we haven't even talked about business yet, but this is really important, because what you're talking about is an intentionality. How can I pour into you in a way that not necessarily mitigates my ADHD, but enhances the possibilities for our mutual joy and experience through it?
Yeah.
I mean, is that something, because I don't have ADHD.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I did, because I'm like, the way you fire off, ideas, I'm like, oh, I could use it. But maybe that's, here's the other thing. If you don't have ADHD, maybe you need someone on your team with ADHD.
I believe it. I really believe it, especially if it's in any sort of role, like we're in the entertainment business. So any kind of creative director, it's almost mandatory. You have to have ADHD. No, my business partner, writing partner, Ryan, he is probably far more ADHD than I am. And
you say that sometimes, but I actually don't necessarily like doing that, because I'm just like, people are different, right?
Yeah,
it's just manifesting differently.
But
and it's funny because he'll be like, oh yeah, no, he was being super blah. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
So
you were like that like 2 days ago.
There's this phenomenon. Yeah, no, we're totally the same. He's my best friend too. Ryan comes in, there's this phrase we use called the sauce. And he goes, I've got the sauce. And he'll have this vision of the most incredible storytelling device, something like that. And it's a witness to behold. And some days too, it's like pulling teeth at the dentist from it. And in a team environment though, I think it can't be overstated, the joy, spontaneity, just pièce de résistance, the finishing touch, the flambe, just exploding on the liqueur, it is so awesome when you have it in a healthy, balanced environment. Yeah.
So are there practical things that PJ can be doing with ADHD to enhance your experience in marriage?
Yeah, always.
Like what?
Yeah, didn't you write a list?
I did.
I swear he has in the past. Yeah, I mean, I think it just changes depending on the season of life that we're in and stuff like that. But for me, it's always just about feeling pursued and seen. And so it's just if I'm having a conversation with you, I want your attention and I need to know that I have it. Or just take me on a basic date and we're chatting and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And we just have one-on-one time together. It's not a lot. And I think that's the thing, is that sometimes maybe spouses feel like we're asking for too much. No, you're not. You're human, and you're asking for human interaction with the person you married. You're allowed. That's actually totally fine. And so, do you actually have a list?
I said, take her phone and write her notes.
I didn't come up with these ideas. I think he came up with these ideas.
I should do these sometime. That'd be a good idea. Write her cards, post on social media about her, bring her flowers, bring her food, leave her a voice to text, email every day or voice message, and then just choose one of those things per day. And
he does some of these,
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. The social media, he doesn't really do social media to begin with. So if you guys go looking on PJ's face,
you don't think I'm married?
Yeah. Who is this guy?
I told him he had to bring you to verify.
Thank you. Most people, when they meet me, are surprised that I'm real. I'm never around.
rental wife.
You can add
Oh
another
my
one.
God,
you're
let's.
kidding.
Oh my goodness.
That's a no.
Oh boy.
No,
Oh no, God.
Are you into music?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do with my wife is on my list is I'll send her clips from silly songs that represent how I feel about her that day.
That is so sweet.
Get a lot. I mean, there's probably a lot of Beatles stuff because she's a Beatles fan, but and it could be some silly rock song, or I'll just send, it might not be a clip from a video. I'll just send her lyrics, like in a text message. And she'll be like, okay, smarty pants, I guess it's Poison today, or some 80s hair band,
That's
right?
really cute.
But just ways to engage and invest and share that I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
You're important.
That goes a long way.
It, like you said, it doesn't have to be complicated.
It doesn't.
It could be super simple. Just be present.
I think that's what bores PJ though. Honestly, because like it's in the simple things where it feels too mundane. It feels too boring. Like, and I'm just like, dude, I think you're making it so damn hard for yourself right now. I am not asking for a picnic in France, taking on a hot air balloon ride.
That's what I think she wants, though, because I know I can.
No, that's what you want. Like, I'm not even going to like let that slide. Absolutely not. That's what you want. And I told, like, I'm down. Like, I'm very much go with the flow.
We've
Let's
done
have a
that
great
before,
time.
yeah.
Not
the Paris and France.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to engage
Pop that thought bubble.
Just go away. But it's like, it's simple. It's the simple things that like make more of a lasting difference in these epic stuff. But like PJ doesn't always like that because it bores him. It's too simple. And so we've had like one of our like annoying conflicts. This man said to me, if I could just delegate someone
I really said it to her.
to plan the date out. And then we
enjoy
just
it.
go
like a
and
mutual
enjoy
surprise.
It. And I'm just like, do you hear yourself?
Dude, that's $1 million business right there. Nate, we need to do a second podcast. I have an idea.
No.
This is a white glove service. They pick you up in a car. Hang on, just give me a second. Pick you up in a car.
No, I'm
take
going to
you
cut
to
you
a
off
new
because
place.
I don't actually
There's a
think
mute
you should
button
still
on that.
be.
They
You know what
write a card for you in your handwriting.
Stop.
It's so authentic.
Yeah.
I wonder if simple can be epic.
Simple can be epic. Simple can lead to epic things. You're welcome. Write that down.
Simple can be the new epic. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept, especially as you really unpack this ADHD world, especially for those of us. Of course, I've read about it and somewhat educated, but from the immediate ground zero experience, I mean, it really helps a lot to understand it and to understand some of these challenges that you face, but also understand how you can overcome the obstacles, but that you don't arrive. It's like everything in life.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's a journey together.
Thank you for joining me on this wonderful roller coaster so far.
It's like he says sweet things and I then end up rolling my eyes and I'm like, stop it. Thank you.
Hey,
Stop.
thanks.
Thanks for coming. I think we should have an epically simple dinner after this show.
I think chicken and a baked potato. That might be
It's the St. Louis special. Don't knock it.
I apologize.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. Yep.